Welcome to Life Stories, where every journey is filled with moments of pain, growth, and healing. Today, we bring you a powerful tale of a woman who faced the heartache of a broken marriage, only to find strength and a new beginning in the aftermath. Follow Emily as she navigates betrayal, rediscovery, and ultimately learns the profound lesson that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful transformations. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's story. Let's dive in together and witness the incredible power of resilience and hope. It had been one of those evenings where everything felt out of place. The sky was dark, clouds thick and brooding, hiding the stars as if even the heavens were too weary to offer comfort. I sat by the window, my book long forgotten in my hands as I gazed at the dimming light outside. The sunset, despite the stormy clouds, cast the horizon in soft orange hues. The glow was fleeting, almost melancholic, like the last remnants of warmth before the chill of the night fully took over. There was a sense of peace in it, yes, but also something unsettling, like the calm before a storm. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Mike's running late again, I sighed, closing the book and placing it on the side table. My heart was heavy. Not from the weight itself, but from the gnawing uncertainty that had settled in my chest over the past few months. We had been married for 5 years, and in the beginning, it was all so easy. Laughter, understanding, affection, it came naturally. But lately, Mike seemed different, and it was starting to unravel me. I picked up my phone hesitantly, my finger hovering over his contact name for a long moment. I hated the way I'd begun to feel like I was walking on eggshells. I knew he was probably busy at work, he often was, but still. This feeling of anxiety gnawed at me, a constant companion that grew stronger with each minute he didn't come home. The phone rang and with each tone, my nerves seemed to tighten. It wasn't that I didn't trust him, but the silence between us had grown into something cold, something I didn't know how to bridge. He'd been working late a lot more recently, coming home exhausted and irritable, as though the world had taken more from him than he could bear. And I was left trying to keep the pieces of our relationship together, all while pretending that everything was fine. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and headed to the kitchen. The red wine in the cabinet seemed to call out to me. And as I poured a glass, I allowed myself to relax a little. At least for a moment. The wine slid down my throat, warming me slightly, but the anxiety lingered, a shadow I couldn't quite shake. I returned to the window, taking in the fading light once more. My mind caught between the past and the present. The moments of joy we had once shared, the laughter, the quiet dinners, the long talks that stretched into the early hours of the morning, seemed like distant memories. They felt out of reach now. Like they belonged to someone else's life. Was it just a phase? I wondered. Was this just a rough patch that every couple went through? Or was it something deeper? The more I thought about it, the more unsure I became. The sound of keys jingling at the door startled me from my thoughts. And before I could react, Mike stepped inside. As soon as the door closed behind him, I could feel the shift in the air, the tension that had been hanging between us for weeks. He didn't even look at me as he entered, just moved quickly toward the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. His face was unreadable, his movements stiff and mechanical, like he was simply going through the motions. "Hey," I said softly, stepping closer to him, hoping to bridge the gap, to find some connection again. "Is everything okay? You seem off." He didn't look at me as he swallowed the whiskey in one go. "Just some trouble at work," he muttered, his voice flat. He didn't even meet my gaze as he set the glass down. The faint flicker of something, anger, frustration, maybe even guilt, dancing behind his eyes for just a moment. I reached out to touch his shoulder. A simple gesture, just to let him know I was here. But he shrugged me off so quickly, as though my touch burned him. The rejection stung, more than I had expected. And I withdrew my hand, my heart tightening with confusion. "Maybe we should talk," I said, trying once more, my voice soft, filled with the hope that maybe tonight, We could finally have the conversation we both seemed to be avoiding. God, can you just leave me alone? His words cut through the air like a slap. His tone was harsh, and it felt like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, my breath catching in my chest. There was something in the way he said it, something that chilled me to the bone. Without saying anything else, I turned and walked to the bedroom. The door clicking shut behind me. I couldn't even look at him anymore. I didn't know how to reach him. He had become someone I didn't recognize. And the man I had once loved seemed to be slipping further and further away from me with each passing day. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind swirling in a haze of emotion. How had we gotten here? How had we gone from two people who couldn't imagine a day without each other to strangers under the same roof? I thought back to the early days of our marriage, the excitement. The love that had once felt so effortless, and now, all I felt was loneliness. My heart ached with the weight of it. I stood up and opened a drawer filled with old photographs. The memories spilled out before me. Our wedding day, vacations, moments of laughter and joy. Seeing those pictures, I could almost feel the warmth of those days. The ease of our love. But it was all gone now. I could barely recognize the faces of the people in those photographs. They felt like a lifetime ago. A wave of grief washed over me, and I felt the sting of tears in my eyes. How had we ended up here? I took a deep breath, wiping my eyes before they could spill over. I needed to talk to someone. Someone who could understand. Someone who wouldn't judge. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of my older sister. Olivia. She would listen. She always did. Hey, Olivia, I said when she answered. My voice shaky. I need to talk. I don't know what's going on with Mike. But I'm lost right now. Of course, Emily, she replied immediately, her voice warm and comforting. What's going on? I closed my eyes and took another deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. I don't know how to explain it. He's not the same. He's distant, irritable, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around him. He barely talks to me. And when he does, it's always angry or dismissive. I don't even recognize him anymore. Have you tried talking to him about it? Olivia asked, her voice filled with concern. I've tried, I said, my voice breaking, but he shuts me out every time. I don't know if he's still in this with me. And I don't know what to do anymore. Olivia paused for a moment. And then her voice softened. Emily, it sounds like something's really wrong. Maybe it's time you take a step back and figure out what's best for you. You deserve someone who sees you, who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. Her words hit me harder than I expected. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone saw me. Really saw me. Thanks, Olivia. I needed to hear that. Let's meet up tomorrow, she suggested. We can talk more. You're not alone in this. As we ended the call, I felt a small flicker of hope in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. A way to find myself again. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to love myself enough to let go of someone who no longer loved me in the way I needed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rain against the window. The day felt heavy, like the weight of the world was pressing down on me. But in the quiet of the morning, I realized something. I had been living for him. For Mike. For far too long. And in doing so, I had forgotten to live for myself. I had neglected my own needs, my own happiness, and in the process, I had lost who I was. I decided to start with something small, something I could control. I got out of bed, making my way to the bathroom. As I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. My face was tired, my eyes hollow with worry. But as I stared longer, something shifted. I wasn't sure when it happened. But the woman in the mirror was still there, still strong, still capable. I just had to find her again. It was then that I made a promise to myself. I would no longer let this relationship define me. I was going to reclaim my life, no matter how difficult the journey. After getting dressed and trying to put some makeup on, I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. As the scent of coffee filled the air, I began to feel a little more like myself. The mundane act of brewing coffee, making a cup for myself, gave me a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a while. But even with the small comfort of a quiet morning, the thoughts of Mike haunted me. I knew he would come home later. And I knew the distance between us would only grow. I felt that ache deep in my chest. The ache of knowing that something vital had died in our marriage. And it wasn't just his fault. I, too, had allowed it to happen. When I arrived at work, I did my best to put on a brave face. I greeted Emily, my coworker, who had been my friend through it all. She could see through my mask immediately. "You don't look like yourself today, Emily," she said with a knowing look. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, not sure if I wanted to open up. But there was something in her voice. An invitation to be heard. That made me decide to share. "It's not good, Emily," I admitted, my voice quiet, almost afraid to speak the truth. "Mike and we're not okay. He's changed, and I'm afraid I don't even know who he is anymore. He's distant, angry, and no matter how hard I try, I can't reach him." Emily's face softened, and she sat down beside me, placing a comforting hand on mine. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I can't imagine how hard that must be for you. But you're so strong, and you deserve so much better than being treated like that. Don't forget that." I felt a lump form in my throat, and the tears threatened to spill over. But I fought them back, taking a deep breath and nodding. Emily's words meant more than she knew. She had always been there for me. And in this moment, I needed her more than ever. "Thank you, Emily," I said, my voice shaky but full of gratitude. I don't know what to do. I don't even recognize my own life anymore." She gave me a reassuring smile. Her eyes filled with empathy. "You'll figure it out, Emily, one step at a time. And remember, you're not alone. You've got people who care about you." I smiled back, feeling a small flicker of hope. Maybe I could find my way back. Not just to myself, but to the life I once dreamed of. It would be hard, yes, but I was starting to realize that I was worth the fight. That night, I called Sarah, my sister, and we made plans to meet at a cafe the next day. I needed her advice, her wisdom. I needed someone who understood me. Someone who could help me make sense of all the emotions swirling inside me. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who didn't take anything for granted. Who loved with her whole heart. And who never let fear stand in her way. It was time to find her again. I wasn't sure how, or when, but I was determined, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe I could. The next day, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. My mind was no longer clouded with the dread of facing Mike. Nor was it clouded with doubt about my own worth. For the first time, I felt like I was finally taking control, stepping into my own power. I made a promise to myself that no matter what happened with Mike, I was going to hold on to this feeling, this sense of self, that was beginning to take root. I had coffee with Sarah that afternoon. Just like we planned, she greeted me with open arms. Her smile warm, and I could already feel the weight lifting off my shoulders just by being around her. It was hard to explain to her exactly how I felt. But the truth was that for so long, I had been consumed with trying to make the marriage work. Trying to hold on to something that was slipping through my fingers. Now, I was starting to realize that I had neglected myself in the process. We sat in a cozy corner of the cafe, sipping our coffee as I began to pour out my heart. I told her everything, how Mike had changed, how distant he had become, how angry and irritable he was all the time. I told her about the loneliness I had felt, the constant worry, and how I had tried to reach him. But it was like speaking to a wall. "Sarah, I feel like I'm living with a stranger," I confessed, "and it's eating me alive. I don't know what happened to him. To us. We don't even talk anymore. I'm losing him, and I think I'm losing myself too." She reached across the table, taking my hand gently, her voice steady and comforting. "I can't pretend to know exactly how you feel, but what I do know is that you deserve better. You deserve to be with someone who treats you with love and respect. And it's clear that Mike isn't that person right now." Her words felt like a balm to my soul, soothing the raw edges of my heart. But even though I knew in my gut that she was right, a part of me still clung to hope. Still wanted to believe that Mike would change, that he would see me. Truly see me, and come back to me. But I had to face the truth. He wasn't the man I had married anymore. And that truth was painful. Later that evening, when Mike came home, everything seemed like it was back to the same routine. He didn't speak much, just walked through the door, barely acknowledging my presence. He went straight to the couch, pulling out his phone and burying himself in it, as he often did. I tried to make conversation, to get some kind of reaction, but it felt like I was speaking to a ghost. I could see the tension in his posture, his eyes darting to avoid mine. I felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. We were supposed to be a team. We were supposed to support each other. I couldn't do it anymore. Mike, I said, my voice trembling, but firm, I need to talk to you. We need to talk. He barely looked up. Not now, Emily, I'm tired. Not now? My voice broke, and the tears I had been holding back finally began to spill. When, Mike? When will it be the right time? Because I don't think I can keep doing this. That's when he looked at me. But his eyes were cold, empty. There was no warmth there. No recognition of the woman he had once promised to love. And then, like a punch to the gut, he said it. I don't have time for this. We've been through this before. I'm busy, and I don't need you stressing me out over nothing. It felt like the ground beneath me shifted. This wasn't just anger, this was indifference. And in that moment, I realized something that hit me like a ton of bricks. He didn't love me anymore. Maybe he never did, or maybe he had stopped loving me a long time ago, and I had been too blind to see it. I stood there, frozen, the weight of his words sinking into my heart. I felt a rush of pain, but also something else, something that scared me. I felt a sense of finality. I can't keep doing this. Mike, I whispered, more to myself than to him. I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when it's not. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, and then he sighed, turning back to his phone. Whatever, he muttered, dismissing me without another thought. That was it. That was the breaking point. I turned and walked out of the room, my mind spinning, my heart shattered but strangely lighter at the same time. I knew I had to make a choice. And that choice was clear. I could no longer stay in a marriage that was built on emptiness and lies. It was time to let go. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I was strong enough to face the world on my own. But in that moment, I knew I had to try. For my own sake. The next day, I called Mike's brother, Noah. We had grown close over the past few months. And his kindness had been a source of comfort when Mike's anger had driven me to the edge. I had never thought of him that way before. But in this moment, I needed someone who cared. Someone who could listen. As I told Noah about the decision I had made, his voice was filled with empathy. Understanding. He didn't judge me. He just listened. You deserve happiness, Emily, he said quietly. You deserve to find someone who sees you for who you really are. Who loves you without question. And if you ever need someone, I'm here. His words were a lifeline. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. It was time for me to move on. And even though I didn't know where that would lead, I knew that I had finally found the courage to walk away. The days following that conversation with Mike felt like a blur. I went through the motions, trying to settle into a new routine. But the weight of everything still hung heavily in the air. I knew I had made the right decision by leaving him. But that didn't make it easier. Every corner of our home was filled with memories, some beautiful, some painful, and it was hard to escape them. It was as if the house itself was a silent witness to everything that had fallen apart. Noah, Mike's brother, was there for me in a way that no one else had been. His support wasn't just a comfort, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Over the past few weeks, he'd become my confidant, the person I turned to when I needed someone to listen. He was patient with me, never rushing me to make decisions, but always encouraging me to be true to myself. One evening, after another long and emotionally exhausting day, Noah suggested we go out for a walk. It was something simple, something to take my mind off things. I agreed, grateful for the distraction, even though I knew the moment I stepped outside, I would have to face the rawness of everything I had been avoiding. We walked through the quiet streets of the city, the night air cool and refreshing. The lights of the city shimmered in the distance. And for a moment, it felt like the world wasn't so heavy. Noah didn't ask questions, he just walked beside me. His presence enough to ease the tension in my shoulders. I'm glad we're doing this, I said, breaking the silence. I've been cooped up inside my own head for so long. Noah gave me a soft smile. Sometimes, you need a change of scenery to see things clearly. His words resonated with me more than I expected. The truth was, I had been trapped in a cycle of confusion and sadness. Unable to see anything beyond the pain. I had been so focused on what I was losing that I hadn't given myself a space to think about what I could gain. As we continued walking, Noah started telling me stories about his childhood. His voice was warm, filled with nostalgia, and his laughter was light. A stark contrast to the heaviness I had felt for so long. His stories brought a sense of normalcy, and I realized how much I had missed being able to just laugh. To feel like myself again. We stopped by a small cafe, a place I had frequented with Mike years ago, before everything had become so complicated. The familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filled the air as we sat at a corner table. Our conversation shifting to lighter topics. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was beginning to breathe again. Noah made me feel like I wasn't just the person I had been in my marriage, but someone new, someone capable of building something beautiful out of the wreckage. You know, Noah said, taking a sip of his coffee, I've always admired your strength, Emily. Even when things were difficult with Mike, you always carried yourself with grace. But I think you've been holding yourself back. I looked at him, taken aback by his words. What do you mean? You've been so focused on making things work with him, that you forgot what it means to live for yourself. Noah explained gently, you're an incredible person, and you deserve to find happiness, to pursue your own dreams. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. He was right. I had spent so long trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Trying to salvage a relationship that had lost its foundation. And in doing so, I had forgotten to live for myself. As the night wore on, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The pain of my past was still there, still lurking in the background, but it no longer defined me. I realized that I didn't have to keep carrying that burden. I could choose to let go, to start fresh. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was ready to embrace it. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Noah's support, and more importantly, I had begun to rediscover the strength that had always been inside me. The evening ended with a quiet promise. One that I didn't need to say out loud. It was a promise to myself, to keep moving forward, to keep building the life I deserved, no matter how uncertain the road ahead might seem. As I walked back home that night, my heart felt lighter. I knew I had taken the first step toward a new beginning. And with Noah by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself stepping further away from the person I used to be, the one who was consumed by doubt and fear. Every day was a small victory, a moment of growth, and with each step, I found more of the strength that had always been there but had been buried under years of trying to please someone else. I was no longer defined by the hurt, the betrayal, or the loss of the past. I had learned that it was okay to let go, and that, in doing so, I was giving myself the chance to live fully again. With Noah's quiet support and my own determination, I was building a life that was mine and mine alone. I was rediscovering the joy of being with someone who respected me and saw me for who I truly was. But more importantly, I was learning to love myself, flaws and all. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sunset, this time with a heart full of hope rather than fear, I realized just how far I had come. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine to shape, and I was finally learning to embrace the beauty of its unpredictability. Thank you for following this journey, and for reminding me that, even when life seems broken, there is always the possibility of healing and starting anew. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the Life Stories channel for more heartfelt tales. Life is full of twists, and I'm glad to have you along for the ride. Stay tuned for our next chapter.